Welcome to episode 4 of the Ramnadi Online Festival. Have you seen the first 3 episodes? In those episodes, we met people who live on the banks of the Ramnadi, who work for the river with full dedication, and we also learned about the different features of the river. In today's episode, we begin with a deep dive into the issue of flooding on the Ramnadi. In 2019, there was massive flooding in the Ramnadi and also other rivers and streams of Pune. Why did this happen? Was it natural? Are there ways to avoid it? Are there ways to protect the people on the banks of these rivers and streams? Let's find out in the report. There are obviously ways to protect the river and the people living on her banks. It is important to look at the entire watershed while thinking of the health of the river. The watershed of a river is the entire area it covers as it flows from the mountains to its confluence or as it empties out into the sea. We have with us architect Jyoti Panse, another member of the Ramnadi Restoration Mission, to talk about watershed management for the health of rivers.
My subject is Ramnadi Integrated River Basin Management. So this integrated word, why it has come? Because though the river system is only single system, there are many fields incorporated in that, such as geology, geography, chemistry, biology, botany, and then demography, chemistry, physics, urban planning, legislation, and many more. So integration of all these subjects together, and then only the proper study can be started. So there are a group of people here and they are expert in different fields, and we have come together, and this is a solution we are finding out. So what is the aim? The first and foremost aim is to clean the river. There are dissolved impurities, floating impurities, and many more things, solid matters. So we have to clean the entire river first, then re-establish the riparian belts. So biodiversity, wetland development, all these things will come as the aim, another aim. Then rejuvenation of streams. Why streams and springs are so important? I will come to that topic later on in the other slides. But those are very important for the river flow, and we have to identify those springs, natural springs. Then rainwater and storm water, its management, its calculation, how to channelize, all these catchment areas and all these things will come in that. Then establishing sewage network. Because this is a urban river, partially it is flowing from rural area, then it enters into urban area. So a lot of human development is there on its banks. And naturally, because of that, the sewage water flows in the river. So we have to attend it properly. And then the water quality. The maintenance of water quality through continuous inspection and then finding out the solution for it. So these are the main aims of this entire exercise. We have identified 5 milestones. How to achieve this target, how to achieve all these aims. So there are 5 different milestones. First is data collection through different means. There are different means and we have to collect the entire data of the river. The second milestone is identifying the threats and then SWOT analysis of the entire river. Then the third is on basis of this data collection and SWOT analysis, the findings. Why I'm calling it as a draft proposal? Because unless we talk to other people, we talk to experts, we talk to residents who are staying there, we cannot finalize the final or detailed proposal. So this is a draft proposal which will be derived through milestone 1 and 2. And this is a public and private participation. So we will give chance to everyone to talk about it and then arrive at detailed proposal. Milestone 5 is implementation, which is again very, very crucial. So we have to take the help of legal framework and the local authority where implementation is possible. So this is a small overview of the river. By now you all know the Ramnadi river basin, or the Ramnadi river is tributary of Mula river. Mula river is tributary of Bhima and Bhima is tributary of Krishna. So this is a very small river, just 18 kilometers. As I said, 30% of it where it flows through rural area, and then next 70% till its mouth, it flows from urban area. So there is variety of land use we can see. While flowing through Pune urban city, it passes through newly developed western suburbs like Bavdhan, Baner, Pashan, Aund. And of course, there are 2 man-made lakes in the river. One is Manas, another is Pashan. But it is a great overflow system of the river. And there is basaltic rock below. So these are the main points of the river. Then the elevation. From its source, which is Khatpewadi, till its mouth, it is near Mura River, in Mura River near Baner. The elevation drops around 550 feet. So at Khatpewadi, it is 2372 feet, and at mouth, it is 1850 feet. So the difference is 550 feet. Though since it is a small river, 18 kilometer, 550 drop in elevation, which is very, very reasonable. We have identified the river basin. In the plan, we have seen the small river hill ranges around the Ramnadi, how water flows from those hill ranges in the river. This is very important because we know the basin area, which is 23 square kilometers, and from that we can calculate many more things. For any river, anyone will say that how water comes in any river. There are basically 3 sources. One is natural spring. As I mentioned earlier, that springs are very important for any river. So here, of course, we'll have to identify springs. Then rainwater and stormwater is generation and its usage. Because all that water comes in river. These are the sources of water in any river. First is springs, then the rainwater, and the third is wastewater. If the river is flowing to urban area, then the waste generated, which naturally flows into the river, sometimes treated, sometimes not treated. But that is also a source, and which is perennial source of any river, which is very important because of that. So the springs, the first source of any river, natural springs. So the experts have identified 22 springs in this river. We have to exact locate those, we have to nurture those, we have to rejuvenate those, because this is also a perennial source of water in any river. Then the second is rain and storm water. So whatever water flows from rain on the ground, which natural with the natural slopes, it flows into the river. As I mentioned again, the river basin of Ramnadi is 23 square kilometers. So the water generated or the rainwater which is falling on the ground in this basin is around 0.25 TMC, which is a huge water, like 6,850 mld water falls in this basin. So we'll have to consider that because it flows in the river. So how to use that and make our river rich in water. And the second is wastewater generated. So there are almost 60,000 families, which I have mentioned in the next slides. So the wastewater generated every day is 32.4 mld per day. So again, this is a perennial source of water. I will discuss about Singapore as a case study here very briefly. Like when Singapore, there is no natural source of water in Singapore. Like there is no river, no lake. So they used to import water from Malaysia years after years. And then they came to know that this is becoming very expensive. Malaysia used to sell water to Singapore. And then they thought of using all sources and collect their own water, make their own water. So they started collecting rainwater from airports, from roads, from building terraces. So every drop falling on Singapore land, which is getting collected, and it's a government water. So they collect, then they have recycled all wastewater and reused it. The rainwater collection is around 20% of their demand. Recycled water is 30% of the entire demand, water demand. And desalination, only 10% of water which is desalinated from seawater because it's a costly affair. And rest everything still comes from Malaysia. But their aim is till 2050, they want to achieve self-sufficiency in water. They will not import water from Malaysia. So this is a great case study. They call this water. So whenever you go to Singapore, whatever water you are drinking, it's new water. They've called it new water. And it is mixing of rainwater, recycled water, desalinated water, and imported water from Malaysia. It's a great case study and we have to learn so many things from that. So what is our learning from this case study? We can use rainwater, but of course not for drinking. We can use that for groundwater recharge. Then we can create small ponds wherever land is available and catch water, catch rainwater. And to treat wastewater properly and then make it flow in the river, we need to install one STP in the river Ramnadi river basin. Now we'll come to demography. So around 3 lakh population is staying on the banks of river, Ramnadi river. So around 60,000 families are staying there. So for any population, what is the demand of water? First is for drinking or for the everyday usage. Second is wastewater generation, and the third is solid waste generation. Now I have scrapped the water demand because the population staying in the banks of Ramnadi, they don't get water from Ramnadi. They get water from Mura river. So whatever, if the water demand of that population is 40,000 cubic meter per day, but it is fulfilled by another river. So we need not consider this. Then the second is wastewater generation, that is 32,000 cubic meter per day, which is huge, which has to be treated properly and then flow it into the river. And the solid waste generation, there are 60,000 families, so 2.5 kg solid waste every day is generated per family. So around 150 tons solid waste is generated on the banks of Ramnadi. And if we don't collect it and treat it properly, people will throw garbage in the river and water will get polluted every day. So this is very important. We have to consider a solid waste treatment plant on the banks of the river. So every river has natural self-cleansing capacity, and after 20 kilometers it gets cleansed on its own. But because of these prevailing conditions, now rivers cannot self-cleanse themselves because of these existing conditions, which is very, very sad. So now previously we have talked about 5 milestones. I have come back to the first milestone, data collection. The survey through drone survey, then total station survey, then river base levels, invert levels, then red line and blue line. There are multiple surveys which has to be taken and studied for the basis of the Ramnadi study or river basin management. Then ecological survey like biodiversity, the flora and fauna around river, then the birds, butterflies, reptiles, which are the species found around the river, then wetlands and riparian belts, and how to protect them, how to nurture them. These are all the things which will come out from the survey. Then the questionnaire, like door-to-door survey has to be taken for land use, for waste management. Every society has is wastewater treatment plant or not. And then solid waste, how they are treating their solid waste. Are they collecting rainwater? All these things will come or will surface through the questionnaires. Then the water quality. There has to be identified booths, location of the booths in the entire 18 kilometers flow. And we have to collect samples every month and how to improve the quality of water. This will also can find out through the survey and how it is possible. So we have volunteers and we'll make 9 groups or 10 groups of these volunteers who will do the survey, door-to-door questionnaire survey, water quality survey. And then on basis of these surveys, we can start finding out the solutions. Second milestone is report. Once all the survey or data is collected, then the reporting it through the actual reports and maps, and then presenting that to the public or the experts. Now, again, we'll come to Ramnadi, which flows through 4 different administrative boundaries. Though it is just a small river, it flows through Bukum and Bugao Gram Panchayat. Then PMRDA, Pune Metropolitan Regional Authority, another administrative boundary, and then Pune Municipal Corporation. So we are talking about one river system, but it flows through 4 different administrative boundaries. That's why the problem comes, like who will do? Once we arrive at the solution, then who will do this? That's why one organizing body to be formed for implementation and monitoring of river system. For survey and findings no need, but for implementation, definitely one organizing body is necessary. So the last is the next steps. Like just now in the very small presentation, we have thought of channelizing springs. We have thought of using rainwater for groundwater recharge. We have thought of creating small ponds. We have also thought of implementing or installing or implementing one STP and one solid waste treatment plant along the riverside, and then create a very nice community gathering spots at the confluence or at Pashan Lake, because public will come to those spots and they will feel affinity towards river. Because if you come near to the river, you will find that you will think of, this is my river and I'll have to take care of this river. That's why there should be gathering points where people will come near the river. They will see water, they will see water flowing and the birds, and they will definitely think, or they will definitely find affinity towards river. So these points have to be created, and then planning, policy framework and implementation has to be done properly. Thank you so much. Thanks.
You must have realized that river protection and rejuvenation is a massive task which involves multiple steps and multiple people. It only makes sense to execute it like a project systematically, as Ninath Patil of Kirloskar Oil Engines Limited tells us.
Namaskar and welcome everybody to this virtual session of Ramnadi Online Festival, which we are actually bringing from on-site of Ramnadi. But before we begin today's session, a quick question for everybody. Is this a nadi, a river or a lake? What do you think? I hear somebody saying lake. Oh, many people saying lake. Okay, this is a lake. I heard somebody saying river as well. Okay, actually both are right. This is a lake called Khatpewadi Lake, which is the second milestone of Ramnadi. But this is actually a river. If you don't believe, you see this water flowing down from here to the next milestone of this river called Ramnadi. So this nadi is actually starting from very near from here and then going across the western part of Pune city and finally meeting the another bigger river called Mura river. We have a consortium of various NGOs coming under the banner of Kirloskar Vasundhara, in which Kirloskar group of companies are also taking very active participation. I belong to one of the Kirloskar companies called Kirloskar Oil Engines, and we have a large pool of volunteers working on this Ramnadi Restoration Mission project. Okay, you heard the word project, and today we are going to talk about the approach that we are applying to this Ramnadi Restoration Mission, and the approach is nothing but a simple project management approach. While working on anything, you always need some systematic approach, right? Project management approach is a common sense applied by a common sense of every person working on the project. So in today's session, we are going to briefly discuss about project management approach and various aspects around project management. So let's begin with the definition of project. What is a project? A project is a very, very unique endeavor. When we say unique, it's a unique, objective oriented, unique set of activities which are having a definite start and definite end. It's a temporary endeavor, it's not a continuous endeavor. Okay, again, it reminds me of river. River is also having a definite start and a definite end. Is it unique? Yes, it is unique because its stretches are very, very unique and not same as any other river. Is it temporary? Except that I think everything matches to project definition of project, right? Because river is not a temporary endeavor. River is a continuous flow. very sadly, this continuous flow of water is getting obstructed for most of the rivers, and Ramnadi is not exception to that as well. When it gets obstructed, it becomes temporary, and very unfortunately I can say that you can equate river to the definition of project. But yes, ideally it is not supposed to be a project because it has got a continuous flow. As you can see from here, this stream of water is flowing from this lake of Khatpewadi down to the next stream near Bhukum. So we talked about project, right? Now let's quickly talk about the project management approach. What is project management? Let's make it simple. We have to plan the things and then work the plan. So make the plan and work the plan. Again, as simple as that. So if you plan the things properly and then you have a strategy to execute it, it is called as project management. Simple enough? Okay, let's add little bit more definition to it. You have to have the knowledge, skills, tools and techniques of project management available at your disposal to carry out this set of activities. Make sense? Yes, little bit more. And third and last thing that would make the definition of project management complete is nothing but a set of balanced triangle. Okay. When I say a triangle, of course we see three sides of a figure, right? And for project management also there are three sides to project, which are scope, schedule and resources. Scope is the amount of work that we are planning, schedule is typically the time frame, and resources are nothing but all the possible available things with you, including manpower resources, to execute the project, right? So these three things need to be in balance, perfect balance. If something is extended, in order to complete the triangle, you have to adjust the other side of the triangle also. For example, if the scope of the project increases, in order to balance it, you have to either adjust the schedule timeline or you have to increase the resources, right? So it has to be in perfect balance all the time. So this actually brings me to a closure of the definition of project management. Okay friends, so we talked about project and project management. Now let's talk about different phases of the project. Now there are actually 5 phases and they all make sense. The initiation phase, the planning phase, the execution phase, monitoring and control phase, and last but not least is the closing phase. Okay. In the initiation phase, the project is actually initiated and we have to mark the start. As we talked about a definite start and definite end, initiation marks a definite start. So we have to declare to the world that this project has been initiated or has started. On this very much ground, we actually broke the coconut for this project and kick-started this project on 4th of June last year, 2019. In the initiation phase, we have to also have a proper document called charter. A charter is nothing but a set of objectives, set of requirements, set of expectations, and how you are supposed to complete or fulfill that. Now this initiation document or charter document is actually signed by the team which is working on the mission, at the same time the beneficiaries of this project. So there are 2 sides to this project charter which are countersigned by both these parties or stakeholders. So this is initiation phase, wherein everything is the boundaries are clearly marked. Then you move to the planning phase. So in the planning phase, which is the next phase of initiation, we actually elaborate it little more. The charter document now becomes a contract, wherein the scope is very properly defined. We know exactly what is the scope of the work. More importantly, what is not in the scope of the work has also to be defined. Otherwise, there will be scope creep. We will be continuing working without seeing the end of the project, right? So it is very important to chalk out these boundaries under the contract. Now inside the contract there are typically very defined and elaborated plans. So we have communication plan, for example, we have risk management plan, for example, we have a communication to the stakeholders plan. So various plans are part of this planning phase. After completing the planning phase, which is I would say a pivot of any project, because if the pivot is loosely held on the ground, then there is likelihood of failure of the project as well. But once we have this planning phase and the document like various plans and contract properly nailed down, then you can definitely move to the next phase, which is nothing but a execution phase. So in execution, it's just do it, right? You heard it right, Nike. Typically it's working the plan. We talked about plan the work and work the plan few minutes before. So execution is nothing but work the plan which you have already planned. However, it is little more than that. There is a lot of people management in execution. There are so many sensitive things which are to be taken care of. A typically entity called as project manager takes care of that. For Ramnadi restoration mission, Virendra Chitra has been nominated as a project manager because he is actually integrated in things and taking care of managing all these stakeholders. So after execution, the next phase which comes in line is monitoring and control. Now what is monitoring and control? Simple, check, check, check. Whatever you are doing has to be checked, right? So it's like controlling the things. If the things are under execution, whether the execution is happening properly or not, that needs to be checked. So you have to have a control on the scope, you have to have a control on the schedule, you have to also see that the costs are controlled, you have to also see that the quality of the work is under control, the communication is happening under control, the stakeholders are under control. So many things which are happening around in the project needs to be continuously monitored, otherwise things can go haywire and it takes very little time to go outside of the boundary of the project, which is nothing but heading towards the failure of the project. So after we complete the monitoring and control phase, the last but not least phase is called a closing phase, right, wherein everything of the project comes to a closure. So typically the contract document with which we started has to be signed at the end, that whatever was actually agreed upon has been delivered at the end of the project, or has been delivered to 90% of what you agreed, or 80%, or in partial fulfillment, or with full satisfaction. So both the parties need to come together and again sign that this was decided and this is where we are right now, and we are agreeing to close the project here. We talked about all these 5 phases in sequence, right? So we talked about initiation, then followed by planning, then followed by execution, then followed by monitoring and control, and lastly the closing phase. However, in a typical project management environment, all these phases work hand in hand. So they don't actually close and then the next phase starts. They are having a lot of overlaps here. They can have overlaps or they can be iterative also. For example, if you go ahead on the project and get more and more elaboration, you can think of initiating something else within the sub project. It can be also called as initiation, or there is a milestone coming, there is a phase which is ending, which can also be called as a closing phase. So typically, if you are completing one particular milestone, you can also have a closure sign off for that, which is nothing but a closing phase, right? Typically at the end of the project, you as I mentioned, you sign the document and complete the things officially. You also take out the lessons learned out of this project so that they can be helpful for the similar project in the future. Friends, this is it about all the phases of the project. Some of the phases we are already working on right now, and some of the phases will be just around the corner. Now friends, having talked about the various phases of project management, phases, if you imagine phases cut into columns, there is a fabric of project management in which this is cut by rows by various application areas of project management. So, we are going to move across these phases using these different project management elements. So, let us start with these management areas. To quickly understand, there are 10 areas of management, starting with the scope management, then comes your time management, which is nothing but a schedule management. You have a cost management, then you have to have a resource management, you have to have communication management, you have a quality management, you have a risk management, you have procurement management, stakeholder management, which is very important, and last but not least is the integration management, wherein all these areas are integrated by a project manager. So, let us quickly understand all these knowledge areas one by one. In a scope management, as we talked about in the planning phase, you have to have a plan. But how to make a plan? For that, you need to break the entire work scope into various pieces. We call it as a work breakdown structure. So, any work can be actually broken down into various phases and milestones or chunk of works. In this particular project, we are going to divide our work by stretches of the river. So, the river moves from Jaseswar Mandir to the confluence, and the entire stretch of Ramnadi has been divided into 10 stretches. Now, every stretch has got set of activities. So, we are actually going to break this work into 10 stretches and then go on further refining the last piece of the scope under the scope management. The next is the schedule management or the time management. Once we define all these activities and have their clarities to the last level, then we are supposed to allocate the timelines to be taken for completing all these activities. So, typically this is nothing but a schedule preparation or time plan preparation, which the work has been already started, and all these stretch owners have actually started dividing the work and allocating the time frames to their respective activities. Now, after time management, we have a cost management, wherein it is a balancing act. I mean, at one hand you see people are enthusiastic about completing the work, whereas on the other hand you see there is a thin balance between the actual work completion and the cost allocated or cost associated with the work. So, typically they need to be very much controlled. You have to have a budget. So, first of all you need to have cost estimation, that in order to complete this activity how much cost is required. You have to have the budget sanction for that, and then once you have the budget sanction, you have to also see how you are going to disperse the cost across various activities. So, that is all about the cost management. Then comes the resource management, in which you have to manage various resources which are required to complete all these activities. Typically when we talk about resources, people think about human resources. Nothing wrong in that. Human resource is a part of resources, but apart from human resources there are many other resources which are required, which cannot be defined straight away by a single person or single entity, but you can avail various services to complete the activities. Let us move to the another knowledge area of project management, which is very important, and that is communication management. Communication is the key of any project. Unless you communicate properly, consistently and constantly with all the stakeholders, there is every chance of failure of the project. So, typically communication has to be done with all the stakeholders. In order to make the communication plan, you have to understand basically to whom to do this communication, who does this communication from the team side, at what frequency it is done, how the communication is done, what is the mode of communication that is to be used. Stakeholder management is very, very important, wherein we have to have the list of stakeholders properly defined. When we talk about stakeholders, there are various types of stakeholders. There are positive stakeholders and there are negative stakeholders also. The people who are going to be negatively impacted are called as typically the negative influencers or negative stakeholders. The people who are going to actually work to make the things happen are the positive influencers. And there is third side of the stakeholders, which are the beneficiaries of this entire mission. And I won't take much time, but last but most important aspect of project management is nothing but integration management, and typically that integration management is done by a project manager. So all these various aspects need to be linked together. You have stretch wise plans, somebody has to link them together. So having talked about all these so called gyan or knowledge about project management, how we are going to apply it to the Ramnadi restoration mission. Well, as I mentioned, we already have a core team in place. Each and every representative of the NGO is part of the core team. We decide the strategy, we also decide the plans in the core team meetings. These team meetings happen very, very frequently. Given the pandemic situations, we have now moved to virtual meetings, and we are also sharing our knowledge areas with each other. Many people didn't know about Ramnadi. Ramnadi is is flowing now because of monsoon. In summer times you won't see it properly, but I would urge all the stakeholders, all the listeners to visit Ramnadi, and we have a program called Ramnadi Parikrama. Our volunteers will definitely be happy to take you along the stretches of Ramnadi. Knowing the Ramnadi is the first step actually, which will actually sensitize you to restore this entire beautiful Ramnadi stretch, and again helping to beautify and solidify our beautiful city of Pune. Thank you very much for your listening, and thank you for your time, and I look forward to your active engagement in the Ramnadi restoration mission.